I've noticed we're losing subscribers. Not the YouTube kind, but the kind that swore they'd be in my life forever. Funny how that works. One day you're surrounded by people who claim to love you, and the next, you're watching them walk away like you were just another phase in their lives. By the way, if you're here, do me a favor, subscribe. It's free, and unlike some people in my life, you won't regret sticking around. They spent my college fund on my sister, then kicked me out. Ever since I can remember, my sister Corey was different. She's 4 years older than me and has Down syndrome. While I always loved her, growing up with her wasn't easy. If things didn't go her way, even in the smallest ways, she would scream, cry, or throw things. It was as if the world had personally betrayed her every time she faced frustration. Because of her struggles, she never had friends. Other kids didn't understand why she was so blunt or why she sometimes lashed out. They just saw someone unpredictable, and instead of trying to get close, they kept their distance. My parents saw this happening and came up with a solution. I would be her friend. Always. If I wanted to go out, Corey had to come too. If I made plans, she was automatically included. I had no say. Sisters should stick together, my parents would say. You need to think about Corey. It didn't matter if I wanted time alone or to just be a normal kid. My life wasn't about me, it was about her. At first, I didn't mind. I figured maybe if she tagged along, she'd learn social skills or even make friends through me. But that's not what happened. Instead, she would push, grab, or even hit kids if they had something she wanted. My friends got tired of it. They stopped inviting me over if Corey was coming, and honestly, I understood why. Still, I tried to be a good sister. I knew it wasn't her fault, and I knew she struggled in ways I couldn't understand. But as time went on, I started feeling invisible. My parents' whole world revolved around Corey, every decision, every plan, every dollar spent. Therapy, special programs, medical checkups. It was all about making her life easier. And where did that leave me? No one ever sat Corey down to explain boundaries, to help her understand sharing or kindness. Instead, they relied on me to fill in the gaps, to be her only friend, her constant companion. And no matter how much I tried, it was never enough. I wasn't just Corey's sister. I was her shadow, expected to give up my own life for hers. But the moment I finally asked for space, the moment I dared to put myself first, they didn't just get angry. They kicked me out. Corey had an obsession with pink. It didn't matter what it was, a purse, a teddy bear, a shirt, or something that clearly belonged to someone else. If it was pink and caught her eye, she had to have it. And once it was in her hands, she wouldn't let go. If anyone tried to take it back, she'd burst into tears, sometimes throwing a full-blown tantrum no matter where we were. I can't count the number of times my parents had to negotiate with strangers in public, either apologizing profusely or straight up buying whatever pink thing Corey had grabbed. It didn't matter what it was or if it was even valuable, they'd pull out their wallets just to keep her calm. I understood that, for Corey, it wasn't just a want, it was more like a need she couldn't control. But watching my parents pour so much time, money, and energy into keeping her happy only made one thing clear. I was invisible. Over time, their way of keeping Corey content spiraled into something worse, what I can only describe as an addiction. At first it was simple. Every weekend my parents would buy her something pink. A toy, jewelry, anything to make her happy. It became a ritual. They used these gifts as a bargaining tool, telling her she had to behave if she wanted more. She would instantly agree, and for a moment, everything would be peaceful. But it didn't stop there. The gifts got bigger, more extravagant. Many of the things Corey wanted were rare or custom-made, and my parents never said no, no matter the cost. For the longest time, I didn't think about where the money was coming from. I just assumed they could afford it. But then I found out something that shattered everything. They weren't just stretching their budget to buy Corey's endless pink treasures. They were stealing from me. When I was born, my grandparents set up a trust fund for both Corey and me, equal amounts for each of us. Corey's fund was meant to help pay for her therapies and medical care, while mine was for my future, college, a home, my life. My grandparents made sure we both knew about it, trusting my parents to manage it responsibly. When Corey turned 18, she gained access to part of her trust, but because she still relied on my parents, they controlled most of her finances. They used it for her treatments, which made sense. But they didn't stop there. Without telling me, they had drained my trust fund too. Every dollar meant for my future had been funneled into Corey's endless expenses. Her therapies, her doctors, and most of all, her never-ending collection of pink things. Everything I thought was waiting for me, everything I had counted on, it was gone. And the worst part? When I confronted them about it, they were furious. Not ashamed. Not sorry. Furious. And then just like that, they kicked me out. When I turned 18, I had everything planned. My grandparents had set up a trust fund for me just like they had for Corey. I had counted on that money for my college tuition, and whatever remained would help me start my life as an adult. I never questioned it. I never had to. It was my future locked away waiting for me. Then in one night it all unraveled. Last week, my grandparents threw me an incredible 18th birthday party, just like they had for Corey when she turned 18. The house was full of family, laughter, and love. For once, I wasn't just Corey's sibling, or the afterthought. It was my day. Everything felt perfect. Then came the announcement. After the cake cutting, my grandparents stood up and told the whole room how proud they were of me. They spoke about my future, my dreams, and then, right there in front of everyone, they revealed that my trust fund was finally mine. The room erupted in applause, people cheering, congratulating me on this incredible gift. I was overwhelmed with gratitude. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. But then I saw my parents. While everyone else smiled, laughed, and clapped, they stood off to the side, stiff and silent. They weren't celebrating. They weren't even happy. Instead, they exchanged uneasy glances, their faces pale and tight with discomfort. A sinking feeling twisted in my stomach. Something was wrong. But I pushed it aside. It was my birthday. I didn't want anything ruining it. Later that night, when we got home, the feeling only grew stronger. My parents barely spoke to me. Normally, all their attention was on Corey, her mood, her health, her needs. But that night, she was perfectly happy, playing with one of her new gifts. The tension in the air had nothing to do with her. It was about me. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I finally asked, "Is something wrong?" That's when my dad let out a heavy sigh and said the words that changed everything. "We need to talk." His voice was quiet, serious. My stomach dropped. We sat in the living room, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on me. My parents exchanged another look before my dad finally spoke. "We can't give you your trust fund." I blinked, not understanding. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, looking ashamed. "It's gone." The world blurred around me. Gone. He kept talking, but I could barely process the words. Over the years, they had spent all of Corey's trust fund on her. Her medical bills, her therapy, her never-ending shopping sprees. And when that wasn't enough, they started using my trust fund too. They had drained 90% of it. The money meant for my future, my education, my life. Wasted. And the worst part? They hadn't even told me. Not once. They just kept taking. I sat there, numb as the truth crashed over me. My parents stole my future. And they expected me to just accept it. I sat there, stunned as my parents tried to justify what they had done. Their voices were laced with excuses, defensiveness, and a twisted sense of righteousness. They told me they had no choice. That of course Corey's needs had to come first. That her therapies, treatments, and even the countless gifts they bought to keep her calm were essential. My father recounted the never-ending expenses, the stress, the burden they carried as her caregivers. My mother nodded along, insisting that the money was spent for a good reason. But all I could hear was betrayal. I pushed back, my voice shaking with anger. "Then why didn't you stop buying her all those things when you knew we couldn't afford it?" They looked at me like I had just suggested abandoning her entirely. "Corey needs those things," my mother said. "They help her cope. We couldn't just take them away." They spoke as if the thousands of dollars they had wasted on pink trinkets, jewelry, and custom-made items were just as important as her actual medical care. As if draining my future dry was justified because it made Corey's world easier to handle. A fire burned in my chest. "Did you ever stop to think about me? About what I needed?" My father exhaled sharply. "You need to understand what we have been through. The sacrifices we've made. The stress we've carried every single day." I cut him off. "And what about my sacrifices? What about what you took from me?" They didn't like that. Suddenly the conversation shifted. They weren't the ones who had betrayed me, I was the one who was being selfish. They told me I was lucky. That because I didn't have Corey's disabilities, I had an advantage. That I was being greedy for wanting the money that was supposed to be mine. Tears of frustration burned down my cheeks. "I'm not saying Corey doesn't need care. I love her. But you went behind my back. You stole from me. And you never once thought I deserved to know." But instead of acknowledging my pain, they gaslit me. They sighed, disappointed, shaking their heads. "You're her sister. You should understand that sacrifices have to be made. We're a family," my mother added. "We all have to do our part." I felt like screaming. My whole life had been a sacrifice. My childhood. My friendships. My future. When was enough enough? Then came the final blow. My parents had a plan for me. A plan I was never consulted on. A plan that had nothing to do with what I wanted. They never cared about my education. They had no intention of supporting me in chasing my dreams. No, what they wanted was for me to take over their role. They expected me to become Corey's full-time caregiver. My mother looked at me pleading, exhausted. You know, we're getting older. We won't be able to do this forever. We need you. My stomach twisted. What are you saying? She softened her voice as if that would make it better. We just want you to take Corey in after you graduate. Get a steady job, let her live with you. That way we can finally rest. My father chimed in, more forceful. You should also start helping now. Get a part-time job while you're in college. Send money home for Corey. She needs to maintain the lifestyle we've given her. It was like the air had been sucked from the room. They hadn't just stolen my future. They wanted to steal my entire life. All the years I had spent hoping, dreaming, planning for a life of my own, they had never intended for me to have any of its star. In their minds, I wasn't a person with my own ambitions. I was just Corey's backup plan. A permanent caretaker. A lifetime of sacrifices. And they expected me to accept it. I felt something inside me snap. I stood up, my hands trembling, my voice raw with years of pent-up pain. Have you ever thought about what I want? Or am I just here to live for Corey? You never even asked me. And in that moment, I knew. I would never forgive them for this. I had spent years giving, sacrificing, and being pushed aside. And now they expected me to give up my entire life for Corey so they could finally rest. I wasn't having it. My voice trembled with rage as I finally let out everything I had bottled up inside me. You've made every decision for me without even considering what it means for my life. How is this fair? How do you expect me to just accept that I don't matter? My parents didn't see it that way. To them, I was selfish for wanting a future of my own. Selfish for not blindly conforming to the life they had planned for me. They wanted me to accept my role as Corey's lifelong caretaker without protest, without hesitation, just as I had done my entire life. But I wasn't that person anymore. For the past week, I had been completely ignoring them. Every time I saw them, all I felt was contempt. They had stolen my trust fund, my security, my dreams, without even a second thought. So I did something they never expected. I reported them. #update 1. Telling my grandparents. I never imagined my story would go viral so quickly, but I'm grateful for the support. Many of you urged me to tell my grandparents, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Since the trust fund was originally created with their money, I knew they needed to hear the truth. I needed their support to take the next steps. I had spent too long hoping my parents would change, believing they would finally do right by me. But it's clear now, they never intended to. #update 2, the confrontation. It's been 2 weeks since my last update. I told my grandparents everything. They were furious. I had never seen them so angry, especially my grandfather. When they learned my parents had secretly drained my trust fund, they were shocked and betrayed. That same week, they confronted my parents directly. My parents stuck to their sob story, playing the victims, saying they had to use the money for Corey's care. They begged my grandparents to understand why they did it, as if that somehow justified their theft. But my grandfather wasn't buying it. His voice boomed through the house. He roared at them, demanding that they pay back every single cent they stole from me. For a split second, I thought my parents would finally take responsibility. But then, my mother started pleading. She told my grandparents that taking care of Corey was so hard. That Corey's trust fund wasn't enough to cover all her medical expenses. That they had no choice. And then, in an almost sickening twist, my parents turned on me. They berated me for telling my grandparents. They accused me of betraying them. My father, livid, spat words that cut deeper than I ever expected. You should be grateful. You were born normal. Unlike Corey. As if that meant I didn't deserve a future. As if my entire existence was meant to be a sacrifice for my sister. And that's when I snapped. My voice was calm, but my words were like steel. If you don't return every single cent of my money, I will sue you. And I will make sure you go to jail for this. The color drained from their faces. For the first time, they saw I wasn't going to back down. My grandparents stood by me, nodding in agreement. They supported me because they knew I was right. I didn't care how much they had spent on Corey. She was their child, not mine. It was their responsibility, not mine. I loved my sister, but I refused to sacrifice my entire life for her. I made it clear, I was done being the forgotten child. My father was furious. He screamed that I had no right to threaten them with jail. He told me that as their daughter, I owed them loyalty. That after everything they had done for me, I should support them. And then my mother, trying to smooth things over, offered me a compromise. Asterisk, there's still 10% of your trust fund left. Why don't you just take it and let this go? Asterisk, like I was some charity case. Like I should be grateful for whatever crumbs they decided to throw at me. But my grandfather wasn't having it. His voice was firm. He warned them that if they didn't return the full amount, he would hire the best lawyer in town and take them to court. That threat changed everything. For the first time, my parents went silent. The reality of what they had done finally hit them. They reluctantly admitted they were in the wrong. They begged my grandparents for time to think things over. But the damage was already done. #moving out. My father was furious with me for exposing them. In his rage, he told me he never wanted to see my face again. He called me selfish. He told me I was a backstabber. And then he did the one thing that set me free. He told me to leave his house. My grandparents immediately stepped in. They told me I could live with them. That I would always have a home with them. That they would help me move forward in any way they could. So I didn't hesitate. I packed my bags, grabbed my documents, and I left. Where I am now. Right now, I'm living with my grandparents. I hate what my parents have done. I hate that it had to come to this. But at the same time, for the first time in my life, I feel free. I stood up for myself. I took back control. And no matter what happens next, I am never going back. It's over. My parents kicked me out, and while it hurts, there's also a strange sense of relief. I miss Corey more than anything. I know that what I did has permanently damaged my relationship with my family, and that's something I'll have to live with. But I do not regret standing up for myself. Update 3, the aftermath. It's been a month since my last update. After relentless pressure and legal threats from my grandfather, my parents finally caved. They signed an official agreement, drawn up by my grandfather's lawyer, outlining how they would repay me. Since they couldn't return the entire sum in one lump payment, they would make installments over the next 18 months. It wasn't the perfect solution, but it ensured that I would get back what was rightfully mine without completely devastating their finances all at once. But the agreement had one crucial condition. If they failed to make a payment on time or tried to back out of their obligation, my grandparents and I had the immediate right to take legal action against them. That clause gave me peace of mind. It was a safeguard, a way to make sure they couldn't just brush this under the rug and move on like they had done with everything else in my life. Where we stand now, my parents still blame me. They refuse to see their actions as anything but justified. In their eyes, I betrayed them. They are angry and humiliated, and instead of taking accountability, they resent me for standing up for myself. Despite their hatred, my grandmother has been my rock. She reminds me every day that I did what I had to do to protect myself and my future. She tells me to focus on moving forward, not looking back. And I'm trying. But the hardest part of all of this is Corey. My sister, my heart ***. I see her from time to time. She misses me. And I miss her. She doesn't fully understand what happened, but she knows something is wrong. She feels the shift. She sees that I'm not around as much, that our parents did something that hurt me. She asks about me constantly. And it breaks my heart that I can't explain everything to her. She deserves to know the truth, but I can't bear the thought of taking my life back. The final chapter ***. It's over. My parents kicked me out, and while it hurts, there's also a strange sense of relief. I miss Corey more than anything. I know that what I did has permanently damaged my relationship with my family, and that's something I'll have to live with. But I do not regret standing up for myself. Update 3, the aftermath ***. It's been a month since my last update. After relentless pressure and legal threats from my grandfather, my parents finally caved. They signed an official agreement, drawn up by my grandfather's lawyer, outlining how they would repay me. Since they couldn't return the entire sum in one lump payment, they would make installments over the next 18 months. It wasn't the perfect solution, but it ensured that I would get back what was rightfully mine without completely devastating their finances all at once. But the agreement had one crucial condition. If they failed to make a payment on time or tried to back out of their obligation, my grandparents and I had the immediate right to take legal action against them. That clause gave me peace of mind. It was a safeguard, a way to make sure they couldn't just brush this under the rug and move on like they had done with everything else in my life. Where we stand now ***. My parents still blame me. They refuse to see their actions as anything but justified. In their eyes, I betrayed them. They are angry and humiliated, and instead of taking accountability, they resent me for standing up for myself. Despite their hatred, my grandmother has been my rock. She reminds me every day that I did what I had to do to protect myself and my future. She tells me to focus on moving forward, not looking back. And I'm trying. But the hardest part of all of this is Corey. My sister, my heart asterisk asterisk. I see her from time to time. She misses me. And I miss her. She doesn't fully understand what happened, but she knows something is wrong. She feels the shift. She sees that I'm not around as much, that our parents did something that hurt me. She asks about me constantly. And it breaks my heart that I can't explain everything to her. She deserves to know the truth, but I can't bear the thought of shattering her entire world. No matter what, I will always be her big sibling. I will always be there for her. But I will no longer set myself on fire to keep others warm. The lesson in my story asterisk asterisk. Family is important, but it should never come at the cost of yourself. Standing up for yourself is never easy, especially when it means going against the people who raised you. But if they are hurting you, manipulating you, and stealing from you, you do not owe them blind loyalty. This experience has taught me that sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. But you still have a choice. You can choose yourself. You can choose your future. And that doesn't make you selfish. It makes you strong. Does this story resonate with you? Asterisk asterisk. If you've ever felt overlooked, used, or forced into a role you never agreed to, you are not alone. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between yourself and your family's expectations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and comment. Asterisk asterisk. Your voice matters. Let's start the conversation.